It's time for Type 40, your Doctor Who podcast from the Spacebook for the Fandom Podcast Network with me, Dan Hadley, Birmingham's King of the Geeks, and your designated driver. Whether you're new to the show or this entire time stream, or you've been aboard before, you'll be happy to hear we're a far-reaching, non-gatekeeping, but eclectic show for everyone. Whatever decade or century you started watching, reading, or listening along to the ongoing adventures of our hero, Doctor Who, we talk about it all on this show. All views are encouraged, and there'll even be a few laughs along the way. Keep your fingers crossed, everybody. So come and step into our TARDIS and share this journey together here with us. Yes, welcome back to the show. And recently, I have to say thank you for all the feedback we've been getting to the show lately, both to the podcast and to the YouTube channel, all the stuff we've been doing over there. It's been great to get, it's been great to hear from you all. And so, yeah, I've been picking my way through some of the direct messages, some of the emails and all the other things and the retweets. It's all going on. And yeah, a few things that have struck me are that there seems to be a belief out there that Type 40 is a kind of classic thing, you know, that we are a classic show rather than an all-encompassing Doctor Who show. And I sat there and I wondered why that could be, because we haven't got a remit on this show to do anything of the sort. For us, Doctor Who is Doctor Who, and Doctor Who fans are all Doctor Who fans, and we're all family and companions all together. But yeah, I did wonder what would it be? What would it mean to be a classic focused podcast or classic leaning? I mean, it's no bad thing to be, is it? But I did wonder where that may have started to appear. Yes, so seeing as we're leaning in to the gaps between the classic and the new, if any of them still exist, there are two very, very particular people I knew could shine special light, unique light on all corners of that particular discussion. Firstly, it's our TV industry insider, my mate Simon Horton. Welcome back, Simon.
Hello, Dan. Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here again.
Yeah. Do you remember when Doctor Who came back? I mean, that seems like quite a long time ago now, doesn't it? 15, 16 years ago?
Well, that of course is the ridiculous thing, isn't it? You kind of think it's recent, and yet it's a long, long time ago. It's 16 years ago. And so to put that into context, obviously with the classic series, that would go from an unearthly child right up to season 16, which is the Key to Time season. And you think of the gulf between an unearthly child and the Key to Time, and it's just like, whoa! And we're talking the same actual time scale in modern Doctor Who now. And this is, you know, hearing you talking about, are we a classic show or are we a new? What are we? And one of my main thoughts with the new series is that it doesn't really seem to have developed that much from Rose to the current series with Jodie Whittaker in. Whereas, as I say, you look at an unearthly child to the Key to Time, it's a massive gulf.
You mean more stylistically?
Stylistically, narratively, I know that the Jodie Whittaker series, the Chibnall years, have gone into territory that previous showrunners didn't go into. You know, that's for another show.
Different question.
But still, that's narratively, it still works in roughly the same way. It's the Doctor is still, the characterization of the Doctor is still pretty much exactly the same as it was right back when Russell T Davies brought the show back. The storytelling is very similar. The story structure is very similar.
It's almost exactly the same.
Whereas, as I say, you look at the gulf between series 1 and series 16 of the classic show, and it can't get much bigger. And so one of my criticisms about the new show would be it hasn't actually developed enough. It's almost like they've rested on their laurels on those first couple of Russell T Davies years and sort of tweaked with it, but never really changed it that much. It's tinkering around the edges for me. And so I think that's a shame, actually. I think they should have changed it more.
Do you remember how, as well, right away, and this is completely understandable, isn't it? When Doctor Who came back and we were all behind it as fans, and you out there, if that was your first experience with Doctor Who, maybe you were swept up in it. It came with that prefix, didn't it, of new Who, new Doctor Who. It was always new. It was loud and clear. And the fan base as well, we played into that. We called it new Doctor Who as well. But of course, the longer something stays back, stays in the public consciousness and stays on TV and visible, then one would think, the less need there is for any prefix, for any barrier between the two. And I think that it did get that way for a time. But here we are in 2021, and I believe that, strangely, that divide between the classic and the new, not only is it still there, but it may actually be setting firmer than ever. Maybe that's just me. You could disagree, listening or watching out there. Simon, I don't know what your feelings are about it, and we've got somebody else we're about to bring in now, and I suspect he can come at it from a different perspective too. Where's this? Yes. So if you've heard him before, if you listen to our review of Revolution of the Daleks, the episode that I can never remember the name of, it was that memorable. So yeah, our next guest, he was on the panel reviewing that episode with us. And if you do watch our live streams over on the Spacebooks YouTube channel, Type 40 Live, then you heard him several times, struggling to get a word in with the rest of us, and yeah, chewing things over about current Doctor Who, new releases and things like that. But yeah, we wanted to get him back on the podcast because he has, well, let's face it, when you've got a voice as good as Barnaby Jago's, it needs to be heard in all its glory at all times.
Hello, Dan. Yeah, thank you so much for having me back on again. It's great to be here.
Welcome back, my friend. So yeah, the classic and the new. You are are you a child of one or the other without saying too much?
Well, I was born during the wilderness years because it went off in '89 and I was born in 1990. So for that entire time, it's interesting. But then I only really saw I got into the classic series through the reruns on UK TV Gold when they came out, because I was lucky to have Sky when I was a kid. And also the recordings on the CD, which were always in Waterstones and things. And I had a friend at school who had the whole, pretty much all of the First Doctor CDs in a big like a CD case, and he'd lend them to me. And I've probably still got a few of them. I should probably try and give those back.
They went for a walk.
Yeah, they went for a walk. It has been quite a few years though. It's been like over 10 years in school, so I should probably get those back to him. But it's interesting when you sort of say that the gap between the classic series and the New Who, because we still call it New Who, even though it came back in, what was it, 2003? It came back in.
That was when it was commissioned. When
it was commissioned, coming in, and I almost like connect that strangely to the end of serialization, because I remember being really surprised when. Because I didn't know anything about, because I was only 13 when the new series came out. I was surprised that they won't go for the serialization angle again, like having a whole story stretched over 4. And I remember even as a kid being really disappointed by that. The other thing was going like, hang on a second. I mean, this guy's Northern. What's going on here? And because I was so used to that kind of like all the Doctors being RP. Yeah. Right back at you. He was fantastic, and he really was. He really got my expectations up. So yeah, I would almost connect it to like the end of serialization, and that's why we have that kind of gap. Because then we have the movie, which we still kind of connect that to classic Who, don't we? The movie.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I do.
That's it.
I do.
Is that only because Sylvester's in it that we kind of connected to that? I suppose.
Possibly.
I don't necessarily think it is. I think, firstly, there is simply less of a gap between Survival and the TV movie in time-wise than there is between the movie and.
It's not by much, but there is less of a gap.
But there is less of a gap. So if it's got to fit in one camp, it definitely, for me, fits in the classic. But also, I think. The movie was definitely tipping its hat to the classic years the way that the Russell T Davies years were very much an entire reinvention. They had they wanted to hit the ground running with no real acknowledgement to the classic series, whereas the movie was made very much as a continuation. So part of that, you're right, Barnaby, is because Sylvester is in it. But the reason Sylvester's in it is because the producers of the show were making it very much as a continuation rather than a reimagining, a reboot. I would say
it's a very distinct classification, isn't it, between a reimagining and a reboot, certainly between a continuation and a restart, a reimagining. They're very, very different things, aren't they? And yet the mainstream press get them mixed up all the time, don't they, Barnaby?
all the time. But even then, the new series still had like nice nods to the classic era, which was really great for me. I think in Dalek in particular, I think was the first kind of nod with the Cyberman head in the glass in the glass boxes, and also even just like referring to in the second episode, we're referring to him as a Time Lord and things like that. I mean, there was still, for me, it's so hard to sort of like quantify, because is it a reboot or a reimagining when you come down to? Because it was almost like it wasn't. It was more of a sort of reboot, but it was almost like a combination of it carrying on, but it's going to be different now. It's good. We're going to put Russell T Davies is going to put his mark on it. So I find it hard to sort of like to quantify whether or not it is, because in my mind it is a continuation, but it's still its own separate thing. So it's a weird difference of things.
It's got its own dynamic and its own flavor. And I think that you're right, Simon. I guess the first time I've ever stopped and thought about it, after nearly 13 seasons, 13 runs if you include the specials, nearly 16 years back on screens, the new series, as much as I personally love it just as much as the classic show, it hasn't really changed that much. I'm churning it over in my head. There must be some way, but I know exactly what you mean. We'll get stuck into that a little deeper as we go along. This is going to be very, very interesting. It's a casual conversation, but about something that means a lot to all three of us in both forms, I think, probably. But yeah, before we get into that, just a bit of time to remind you of some of the fixed points out there, the things that we have to remind you of as part of the Fandom Podcast Network. Yeah, you can do some real time traveling of your own, because each and every edition of this show, past, present, and future, is just a tap or two away on the device of your choice if you know where to look. There'll be more about all of that a little later on, as well as a segue over to the matrix of all knowledge. That's what we call the Fandom Podcast Network, for a few words of wisdom about some of the fantastic other podcasts and great conversations that are going on over there throughout the multiverse.
You say Matrix, and I want to do my Elgin impression. Hello, Doctor. Goodbye, Doctor. And Spandrel. God, how does Spandrel say? Oh, he's sorry. That actor sounded like he was drunk throughout all of the Deadly Assassin. What? He's going over there. What? Oh, God, find him, Castellan.
George Pravda, yeah. I think he's Polish or he's Russian, isn't he? By nationality. That's what he is.
It probably is, but I'm sorry, it's still quite hard to understand what he said.
Oh, bless him, he's adorable. They're both adorable.
He was great, though. He was great.
I suspect that recording sessions were broken with a luxurious, a generous lunch hour in the bar.
It was the BBC in the 70s, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know this, but I suspect. Okay. Right. Yes, now, Barnaby, we're going to start in a very, very specific place. I've got something to show you here. Now, I've never actually seen one of these in real life, and I wonder if you have, but this has been sent along to me because this is very pertinent to a very exciting revelation, a brand new story that broke from the Doctor Who universe this week. So take a look. Let's see if we can work out between us what this is.
Is it something that goes in K9?
It's metallic. It's definitely metallic.
It looks like it looks like ticker tape is more familiar to me than whatever on earth that is. It's a video cassette recorder. I can see that.
I'm going to say that it's got a front-loading sort of cassette recorder, the way you'd get on a VCR. But all those dials and switches, it looks like something you'd need it to sort of record where radiation was present.
Something that Blake will just press a couple of buttons on. Is it a Betamax? Is that what they were called? Betamax?
Betamax. No, it's not. No, it's not. Good guess, but it's not.
Get in. I mean, if we get in just a little, there's a label above the gap there, and it says U-matic. Now, I've heard the expression U-matic several times. I personally thought that was a kind of drill, but apparently, I'm way off. But fortunately for the both of us, we do have a TV industry insider sat there sneaking at us both now to fill in the gap. So, Simon, what is this that we're looking at?
Yeah, this is you're right, it's U-matic. And so no, it's not Betamax, it's not VHS. So this is an industry standard video cassette machine, or videotape machine. Really, they taught, you back in the days you would have heard roll VTR, roll videotape recorder, and that's what would roll. That is the exact thing that would have rolled when they wanted to bring in an insert, a recorded insert. It used to be, I think, Roland Rat always used to say, "Roll VTR, Kevin," and that's what they would roll. And so what it is an industry standard. I've used it so many times. It's not really used a great deal anymore because obviously it's been completely replaced now by digital. But you will find that most editing houses, all broadcasters will have at least one of these, and normally, in the case of the BBC or whatever, multiple of these machines, because although they are defunct in inverted commas from the point of view that everything's been replaced by digital formats now, tapeless formats, literally on a USB stick or an SD card, rather than even on tape. Tape is long since gone. But they will all have these because of the fact that we still have an enormous amount of archive recorded on these tapes. And so I've got for you here, I can show you, boys, I can show you a tape that would have gone into one of these little beasties.
My God, it's enormous.
That is as you'll see there, you can see the U-matic logo again there, U-matic SP. So this is the format that was developed by Sony in 1969.
Simon, it's bigger than your head.
It is actually. It could fit my head into that. And if I open it up for you, as I say, it was introduced by Sony in 69, started moving into the industry in 71. So if I open it up, what I love about these broadcast standard tapes is that they come in these fantastic. That is a real
hard plastic.
I tell you what, that would survive a nuclear explosion. It's and so what you do is you open it up, and inside is the tape. And this is my very first own professional production from 1996. There we go. And it was a documentary I made called Ghosts of York, Master Tape, January, February 96. And you can see you've got all these little tick boxes there that you can tick to say, is it in mono, stereo, PAL, color, so on and so forth. Because obviously all that were very important for the broadcaster to know what it is that they're about to show. And you can just about make out there through the window, that is the tape, which looks like an old VHS cassette from that point of view. But what's interesting about U-matic tapes is they actually go, the spools actually go opposite. So if you ever, for those of us who remember VHS machines, and you'd look through the window on top and both spools would be going the same way, on U-matic tapes, they actually go opposite. I've never understood why and how. It's like magic, but they do. One goes clockwise and one goes anti-clockwise. But that is a U-matic tape. That there, the little red dot there, that's the protection button. So you can take that out if you want to and tape over it. But once that is in place, it's protected. It's the same as a VHS tape again, in that it's got the little little flip up.
So Simon, do you think that the VHS, and Betamax for that matter, that those domestic formats, did they take the principles of that and just imagine them in a more compact and cheap to manufacture way?
Absolutely, totally. And Barnaby wasn't a million miles off when he said Betamax, because Betamax is actually closer to this format than VHS. VHS diverged more from this format. And so what that is, that would have gone into that machine that you've just seen there. In later years, they developed into these tapes. So you can see the difference in the size between these two.
Smaller.
Yeah, this is smaller. So this is now a Beta SP tape. So you can see the difference in size. You can see
those are the Betamax tapes that I remember from the video hire shops, Barnaby, in the mid 80s.
You can see that this is literally half the size. The Beta SP, there you are, Betacam SP. That is literally half the size of the SP. And again, as I say, Barnaby, that tape is very close to a Betamax tape, and you're right, Dan. Those are the ones that we used to that we used to get from the video recorder, shop. You can see there's a little Yorkshire. If anybody can make it out, there's a little Yorkshire television symbol just there. This was the short film that actually got me into television in the first place. So that's quite, that's an important part of my history. And it was mastered. The final film was mastered at Yorkshire TV, which no longer exists. But that's why that has got the Yorkshire TV logo on it, because that was where it was ultimately mastered. On this one, the protection is a little red square there. I can't quite remember how
because
that
obviously
works now.
On a VHS tape it was a little plastic tab that you could twist and break off, and once it was off, and you could sort of put a bit of sellotape over it. Yeah, but
this obviously needs to be a little bit more robust. So that, as I say, was a beta Betacam SP, and then those ultimately a few years later changed into digibeta, and you'll often hear people in the industry talking about digibeta, and then ultimately it went down to high 8, which are tiny little tapes, and all these are broadcast standard
so
quality
with
formats.
The advance of the generation of formats, the picture qualities remain the same.
That's a real. Well, of course there are purists out there who would argue with you, because once it went on to high 8, which are tiny little tapes about the same size as an audio cassette, the quality is simply not as good as digibeta. So what you would do, for example, if you were filming a drama, let's say in the 90s to early 2000s, you would have used digibeta versions of this, which is that tape, but it's a digi version, and that was very, very high quality, whereas the small ones would have been useful. They would have used those for, I used to use them a lot for fly on the wall documentaries, that kind of thing, because they're very, very small, very lightweight cameras. But these obviously go into full size, massive full size television cameras, and ultimately, of course, now they record on SD cards. Simple as that. Everything goes onto an SD card. So this is a defunct format.
So the classic series of Doctor Who. So when we look back to the run between Hartnell and McCoy, those 150, just over 150 stories would have originally been mastered on those large cassettes that you would just
back in the 70s they would have been mastered on reel to reel. So these came in as a later format in sort of the 80s really, although they were kicking around. A lot of it would have been on older equipment, and would have been recorded on reel to reel. But these tapes are literally the very first ones to use the reels of tape enclosed in a plastic shell, as opposed to loose reels that you would spools basically, that you would put onto a machine and have to wind up and attach onto a blank spool. This was the first one that used a cartridge, cassette, whatever word you want to use, the plastic box that it goes into basically, and that revolutionized the industry.
Sorry, Barnaby, what were you going to say?
No, I was just wondering how long, how much footage could you store on one of those tapes? How long? Was it like an hour?
It's literally the same as VHS tapes in that you can have them there are a number of lengths. This is, as you may guess, it is. Any guesses as to how long that one's going to run for?
30 minutes, isn't it?
30 minutes, absolutely. So that's 180. There's 186 meters of tape on there, if you can just about make that out. And 30 minutes on that one. And interestingly then, likewise, 30 minutes on this one. So again, you can see the difference that is being brought in. So you would get longer, you absolutely get longer beta tapes than 30 minutes, because they would certainly record, full 1 hour programs on there. I'm not actually sure what the top end is. I'm not sure that they go up to sort of 2 hours. I'm guessing not. I would imagine that the maximum used to be an hour on these. I can't remember, but you would certainly have got different lengths of tapes to use. Sometimes you'd get 10-15 minute tapes, and so theoretically those would be cheaper. But you're then compromising quality.
To make sense now, Simon, because Barnaby, I remember when shows like Noel's House Party that was on in the 90s, like big entertainment shows, sometimes when they take you to BBC Television Centre And if presenters were being a little naughty, people like Noel Edmonds, or back in the day, people like Kenny Everett, and probably back even further, they'd sometimes have this sort of rebellious streak, and they'd take you behind the scenes and drag a cameraman backstage through the galleries and all these other places at the BBC, and you would see enormous cartridges of things, great hulking grey things, and rows upon rows of them, and racks. And there used to be TV shows about archive TV, and you'd see these things lined up, but I never really knew what they were.
What are they going to do with all that space then? I mean, they've got all that space where they used to store, the mile high kind of like packs of these things. What are they going to do with them? Just turn them into new studios, I suppose. Yeah.
What's interesting, of course, is as I say, back in the day in the 70s and through to sort of the early mid-ish 80s, they would still have been recording on large, much larger tapes. And when you watch The Trial of a Time Lord, you will see that Drathro is walking around with one of these
the cans.
Yeah, with the paint can, and of course they were just coming out of using those at that point and coming much more into U-matic tapes. And what would happen once you sort of used it, you would open the tape up, and you'll see that I've done this one. So you take that out, you take the card out, you flip it over, and that way you can then fill in on there all the details.
Details of what's on your media.
So there's not like an old VHS tape that you would write over it a million times. No, you get a little label, and you can put a new label in. And these will be repurposed numerous times. And this, of course, is the
that's where Doctor Who comes in.
Yeah. Absolutely, because they wiped so much of them because they were precious. So what they would often do, you see, is they would keep old episodes of Doctor Who, or certainly old rushes, studio footage of Doctor Who, would be retained on these. The programmes as broadcast would have gone out on 2-inch tape, which is obviously much bigger than this. But they would often retain a lot of the assets would be retained on these, because these are still broadcast standard. So there's nothing wrong with the quality on them.
That's a word I hear a lot as well, Simon. Assets in terms of television production. It's all starting to make sense now, even to a layman like me. But I saw, because this week, I mean, it doesn't take Doctor Who fans much to get excited about things, does it? And announcements and little drips and drops, and certainly rumours are always everywhere, particularly about missing episodes and return footage and all that kind of thing. And so I think as a community, we've always got one eye, one ear out for whatever we hear, and depending on how much that we know about media and about the industry, it depends on how much we can sort of take in and put in context, I think is the phrase. I'm not too bad. I'm certainly not better than I was. It's all starting to make sense. But obviously there are people out there who've written books on the subject. Our friend Richard Molesworth, for example, he's just got this encyclopedic knowledge of every format and every nation they've ever been to and all that sort of thing. But yeah, we're sort of still waiting with bated breath for the simple whisper of any Doctor Who entire episode returning to the archives, for example. We're always looking out for that. But even a 5-minute excerpt, a clip, whatever. I've seen things, elements and clips that have lasted 4 seconds come back to the archive, Barnaby, and been met with open arms and rapturous response.
Yeah.
But I saw
it's really exciting. Yeah.
It is really exciting, because they're slithers, aren't they, rather than chunks.
Well, stuff for me as a kid, I can only just sort of imagine. And then, like, I remember when the first Yeti one turned up. No, the second one in the tube. And the Web of Fear, and I was just so happy. I was just going, it's not at all how I imagined it. It's brilliant.
It's not how I imagined it, but it's still really, really good.
It's still fantastic.
This week I was on social media and I saw this announcement from I don't know what you would call them, the collective known as Kaleidoscope. I'm going to use the word collective because they are an unofficial body of, I suppose you'd call them film historians, enthusiasts, and missing material hunters, I suppose, if you wanted to sort of be really romantic about it. And they've got their own social media presence. They've got a website and a portal, and you can sort of sponsor Kaleidoscope. You can get involved with them in that respect and help support their work. But they've also got a social media presence and a Facebook group. And when they have taken when they've received a consignment of new material, and they gradually have to catalogue when something comes their way. For example, when they inherited the collection of Bob Monkhouse, I think it took them a couple of years to catalogue everything that the late comedian left in his fabled VHS collection. But this is something that happens on a yearly basis for Kaleidoscope. They're always either buying or being gifted material, making their way through it, and they make some formal announcements really via their social media arms. And this one came out this week. So here it is. It's from Chris Perry, who is the sort of the leader of that collective, and it says Discovery 638 Doctor Who studio recordings. So this is from The Keeper of Traken, scenes from episodes 1 to 4, 4 to Doomsday, scenes from episodes 2 to 4, and the BBC School series today and tomorrow, episodes 3 and 4. So we're not so interested in that, are we? But it says earlier in the year, Kaleidoscope planned to bid on a batch of U-matics, as Simon's just been explaining to us, that contained these recordings. They reached an agreement with the gentleman, the consortium that had held them, so that the material could be secured. And this guy, Mark Humphreys, from the Star-Lord Consortium, he was involved, and he says there's a lot going on the 4 to Doomsday tape, with setting up of the shots in the airlock for the spacewalk out to the TARDIS. So these tapes are very interesting. But it finishes off with saying that Kaleidoscope had hoped to show some of the footage at their next Missing Believed Wiped event that they hold in Birmingham. So this is a regular thing they do a couple of times a year. Usually that's not going to be possible for the time being. It says Mark and his team have been informed that hopefully this footage will be on a future Blu-ray release. So the U-matics themselves have been transferred to file by David Martin at Abbey Video Productions. So Simon, speaking as somebody who's just walked us through these formats, looking at this announcement, material's been returned effectively to the archive and for us to eventually see. But what exactly is it that we'll be getting and will make it through to Blu-ray? And why is it worth getting excited about?
Well, I am grinning like a Cheshire cat at the moment because this kind of footage, as people who have watched the show before now or listened to the podcast will know, I just love seeing this behind the scenes footage. Of course, what's particularly interesting about 4 to Doomsday is that it is Peter Davison's first story. Now, we've already seen, if anybody that's got the season 19 Blu-ray release, that has got an hour of studio footage on there, which is actually Peter Davison's first ever studio session as the Doctor, and that's the entire tape. What they've put on the 4 to Doomsday Blu-ray is the entire tape of studio footage that has been held for a while, and as far as we were aware, that was it. That was all the footage that existed. So to suddenly find that we've got another block of studio footage from 4 to Doomsday is fantastic. It's the same with Keeper of Traken. I wasn't aware of. I don't think anybody was aware of any Keeper of Traken raw studio footage. I certainly hadn't seen any. I think I'm confident in saying there's none on the season 18 Blu-ray. So I think this is the first studio footage we will ever have seen from the Keeper of Traken. And as I say, to me, this is just absolute gold dust, above. Second only to the recovery of episodes. Of course, recovery of episodes is top. Recovery of studio footage or film rushes is absolutely second for me, and I just adore seeing it because it just gives, for anybody that's watched the raw studio footage on the Blu-rays as they've been released so far, and on some of the early DVD releases as well. Some people might watch it and think, how many times can I watch them set up this one shot? It's of no interest to me. So, but for me, it's enormously interesting. Now, I don't know whether that's purely because, I've worked in television, and so I can totally relate to it. Or or is it because are all Doctor Who fans going to be as interested by this? I don't know. That's
Barnaby, are you interested?
For you guys to answer.
I'm actually really interested in. My housemate and I have been watching the behind the scenes footage they've got from the Visitation on their Blu-rays, and even though it's pretty much just one of them is just like one shot of them setting up the aliens in the background. It's only like one shot of them on a monitor, but it's just fascinating. Just seeing the guys at the studio just talking to them, saying like, "Hey, we're going. Yep, very good. One more, please. Sun and sunset, everyone." And it's just, and I've worked in behind the camera a few times myself, so maybe that's also why I find it really fascinating. But how it's kind of changed, but hasn't really changed that much. There's still the old someone's going to be talking in the back, like, "Can you be quiet, please? Thank you."
So Barnaby,
there's still that going on, so that's great.
Barnaby, why doesn't any of this stuff break the spell for us? Do you think?
I don't know. I think it's just, again, because it's connected to something that we love, and it's another thing we haven't seen. And I think most Whovians love to watch. Oh, it's another thing no one's seen before, and it's like another extra layer onto it now. And what the people were like behind the camera as well, because we're always interested in the directors, in the script writers, and things like that. We love hearing about them and chatting with them. And also just to hear, a runner on set, and we're just thinking, oh, who's that? What is his story? How did he end up there? What did he think was going on?
Dash around, don't they, holding clipboards?
Yeah.
I think Barnaby, you're right. I think to a large extent it's the characters of the real people. I'm not talking about the fictional characters. I'm talking the characters of Peter Davison, Tom Baker, Jan Fielding, whoever it is. And you're right, producers, directors, because I think generally as Doctor Who fans, we tend to invest more in it than just a passive watching of the show.
Yeah.
We've invested time and money in the actors and the production personnel as people. We're interested in their lives. We're interested in how they work within a studio setting. And so I think it is that, because we go that one step further than just this passive watching. It's fascinating to watch people at work that we kind of feel in a way we know. We sort of almost know they're almost our sort of friends. That, well, in many respects, they are as much a virtual friend as a virtual friend you might have on Facebook.
Yeah.
And so in that respect, we want to see them at work. We want to see how it works. What are they like? How does it work? Do they get angry? There's some fabulous footage of Tom Baker from the Leisure Hive getting really quite grumpy. But it doesn't take anything away from my love of Tom Baker or the Leisure Hive. It's just interesting to see how it got to the screen in the first place. That's the interesting part.
It's like we're there as well, because I love watching the idents as well, going like, and now on BBC One, a new adventure for Doctor Who, and sometimes they pronounce it wrong, like, and now on the talons of Wing Ching.
Yeah.
And
you can tell that the announcer had not seen it the previous week, and they're just reading some A4 that they've been handed like 30 seconds before.
Like, oh, wasn't that exciting? Doctor Who comes back at the same time next week, and it's just fun seeing the old globe and just seeing that. It's like, again, it's just it's almost like I'm there in the 80s watching it on telly for the first time. So that's fun.
Have you seen those ones where sometimes, because I remember those globes, I would imagine that you do as well, Simon. So a lot of those announcers, when I hear those voices, they were, when you're growing up in the 70s and the 80s, the continuity announcers there were almost like part of the family, because there's only 3 or 4 of them, and so you knew all their voices. But now on some DVD and Blu-ray releases, we even get those like the studio countdown clocks and slates, handwritten slates, and people counting down. That also has that appeal to me as well, because you can feel, I don't know if it's the same for you when you're at the day job, when you're recording. I think I'm not actually on set. This is all happening decades ago, and yet you can almost feel the tension in the air when they're counting down to action.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the thing is to bear in mind is that back in those days that you're talking about, sort of in the 70s, 80s, even earlier, they really were counting down to starting the recording, and then they knew they'd got 2 hours to get the whole show in the bag, and that was it. And it is a tense environment. The studio environment is very tense. Some of my early work was on Emmerdale, and it's some of the most stressful work I've ever done was working on Emmerdale, because once those cameras start, you cannot afford to stop.
There's
you can't
a momentum to it.
Absolutely, and I can remember my early days in television on Emmerdale was literally as a third AD, third assistant director. So I had the unenviable task of if we were going to go into overtime because we weren't going to get all the footage recorded that day, I was the one that had to go around to all the members of the production team and all the actors and say, do you mind if we go another 10 minutes over? And of course, so all the bile and the annoyance was leveled at me. And so they would
first line of defense, Simon Horton.
it is a tense environment, and so it's difficult. It's easy to overlook that and forget that those recordings of Doctor Who, or any television drama from that era, it's a wonder they got anything in the can at all, because it was such a tense environment. The pressure was huge to get the show on and finished within those 2 hours of production time, of studio time.
Because for all that we've said as well about the lifespan of the new series and how some things may not have changed, it did seem that TV production, it seems to have gone a little more filmic now, Barnaby, whereas between the 60s and probably the mid to late 90s, it still was all very three-walled.
Well, actors were still, because the majority of actors back then were stage trained, and people were still like coming to grips with, and actors were still coming to grips with how to act in front of the camera, and certain things work in different ways. But I quite sort of enjoy that. I was actually rewatching last night The Black Hole. That's why I mentioned it to you, Dan, later on. Amazing film, but very much that kind of like, yes, very good, Vincent. We need to go there and do that and do. Oh, there he is. Love him. And that's sort of like, we need to go and do that and go and do this, and it's very much like he's projecting. He's got his face to camera, that kind of thing, and it's still very that kind of like era. But then moving along, stoicism, very sort of bombastic and theatrical. But then as it moved on, it became more sort of filmic and. Talking
about stoic and still playful at the same time. Reminds me of Mr. John Pertwee, who was obviously a very strong character, and of that age, really. Yeah. If he can muck about, then all of us can.
Exactly.
Yeah. So when we think back to the history of the show being made. As part of a machine with that momentum, classic Doctor Who, bang, 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 particularly when it was on, in the Hartnell and Troughton era, when it was on most weeks of the year, something like 40-odd weeks of the year, it still seems like a real feat. And even more so when you see the technology that was involved, enormous players and cassettes, and obviously the limits that all human beings have, whether they're behind or in front of the camera.
Well, also the interesting thing, anybody that's kind of looked into sort of the production history, certainly in the 70s, during, say, for example, the Barry Letts years and the Philip Hinchcliffe years, you will sometimes read in certain books, the archives, for example, where you're reading about the studio day, and there will often be a memo there from Barry Letts, for example, saying, sorry, we overran, there was an overrun in the studio of 15 minutes because the tape machine broke down. We're literally talking something as simple as that. Yeah. That the technology was that sort of fragile, that tentative, that you could literally have an old tape machine for one of these that would literally break down, and that was it. You lost 15 minutes of studio time, and you then were in a situation of you either just drop a few scenes, or you go around and to make this clear for anybody that hasn't been in a studio of that era, you absolutely would have had somebody would have to go around and ask each individual person, do you mind if we overrun by 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever? And if one person said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do it, that's it. Your studio period was over and you were done. And there was terrible demarcation problems as to who did you ask first, because back in the we're talking union days here. And so asking the right people in the right order was also crucial, because if you asked the Lecky before you asked the Chippy, For example, what he's already given permission, and you should have come to me first. It's like, oh, it is, and of course, everybody wanted to be asked first, and everybody wanted to give permission first. They were fraught days, and as Terence Dix has famously said, our raison d'être was purely to just get the show on the air, and that's why, in many ways, you look back on those old Doctor Who's of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and it's a miracle that they are of any standard whatsoever for us to want to rewatch. They were great for a first watch, but for us to want to still keep watching them and be able to look through all the faults and the shortcomings of the special effects that were left till 10 minutes before the end of the studio day, it's amazing that they were at the standard that they were.
I don't suppose we should be surprised that machines like that U-matic recorder that we saw earlier on, that we've been talking about, that we've been describing, having a bit of fun with, we probably shouldn't be that surprised that these machines survive intact, because they look like miniature tanks, don't they, Barnaby?
Yeah, definitely built to last. God.
But looking at the cassettes themselves and the footage and the material, obviously we've had these new finds, this new footage that's been returned to the archive that we are going to apparently see at some point down the line. Maybe the greatest danger to those, because those cassettes, they look formidable too. The greatest danger to that material probably wasn't through damage, unless somebody threw it in a fire. I mean, who would do that? Unless somebody threw it in a fire, the only fate that is going to befall them is just getting lost amidst a wealth of other material, or simply being put through the TV system, the chain, the industry, the distribution networks.
Well, I mean, every time you play one of these cassettes, they slightly deteriorate. Simple as that. There's right? Oxidation and stuff. So they do gradually deteriorate. And also, and this is the heartbreaking part, of course, they can be taped over. And so we know for a fact that a lot of footage was of raw studio footage from Doctor Who in the 80s was kicking around. JNT, John Nathan Turner, had endless tapes, VHS tapes of studio footage that he taped over with Coronation Street, because he just used to take them home and use them for time shifting for Coronation Street. And we know we've lost studio footage through that. So that, of course, is the fragility of the format, and why so much of this stuff has gone. There's a tantalizing tiny little bit of Planet of Evil, the 1975 Tom Baker story, right at the end of not even a Planet of Evil tape. I can't remember. It's at the end of Animal Magic or something or other. There's just literally a few seconds, 30 seconds or something, of studio footage from that. To have the whole tape of that.
Whilst we can bring people to task, Barnaby, for perhaps not foreseeing the rise in home media, let alone streaming, for not seeing that 30, 40 years ago when this stuff was junked, that's actual material. It's probably unreasonable of us to expect that material that was never intended to be seen should be kept, particularly when it was license fee payers' money. But nevertheless, what does get returned to the archive and made available to the fandom in any context, it's put a smile on all our faces just speculating about it for the last half an hour or so. So yeah, I can't wait to see it. And I do watch it. I mean, sometimes I watch it in bursts, and then I fast forward a little to see if anything happens. But I love the fact that it's there, Barnaby.
I want to see Peter swear again, because that's one of my favorite behind the things bits.
Absolutely.
Well, the thing that I wonder is, what on earth are they now going to do with it? Because, of course, season 18 and 19 have both been released on Blu-ray. We kind of thought they were definitive editions. People are already joking about these will be on the special editions or the 4Ks or whatever. Who knows? It would feel wrong, because they've been so precise with the Blu-rays to keep everything very contained as to the correct thing at the correct season. You can't put them on a Blu-ray release now without them being out of place, unless they do to at some point re-release season 18 and 19. But we all want to see it, don't we? Let's be honest, we all want to see that footage. I'm desperate to see more. Desperate.
I was when I heard that this had been returned, I thought, well, I have to tell the guys, I have to tell all you lot, just to see the looks on your face here. Have you heard? What do you think it is? When do you think we're going to see it? But that's Doctor Who fandom. That's how we all tick. It's time for us to take a little break, just a couple of moments, to remind you about some of those other fantastic conversations going on across the Fandom Podcast Network on all those other shows. So listen up for a couple of minutes to a friend of ours about all of that. Then meet Simon and Barnaby and myself back here in a couple of moments to do more geeky Doctor Who talk across the universe.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Bloody Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
Yes, we've teased and tantalized you there, and we can even clothe you too. There's merch to match all of those shows, including Type 40, if you head over to tpublic.com and search for the Fandom Podcast Network, and there you'll find a storefront of all the team colours for all of those shows, on everything from T-shirts to phone cases and tapestries. Seeing is believing. Treat yourself. Treat your other selves, and it all goes to support the Fandom Podcast Network into the bargain, so everybody wins. Just this once, Rose. Everybody wins. We're back with Barnaby and Simon. You like that, do you? We're back with Barnaby and Simon for more Doctor Who talk. And yes, specifically, I wanted to look at this with you guys because, we were talking about the classic and new series sort of dilemma, why that divide is still there, Barnaby. What's going on? And you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be that surprised, because the classic branding may have gone by the wayside. The legacy branding that we loved so much, those chunky, friendly Pertwee era logos we used to see across all the merch, in favour of this sort of homogenized branding that we now have. But there is a definite line. There's a definite difference between new series and classic Who merchandise and material in the way that it's put out. Now, I've been looking at this. This is a list we have of all the biggest Doctor Who events, things that have been released just this year in 2021. And it really struck me looking down how much of it is related to the classic show. So in January 2021, obviously we had Revolution of the Daleks, that special that Barnaby, you and I talked about.
Oh,
for a good hour or so. You still haven't felt
I still haven't seen.
So obviously there's that. But then in February, we've got the 50th anniversary steelbook that got released. Okay, it's old, but it's not old. It's new series old. But then you get into March and you've got the season 8 of the classic show on Blu-ray. And we have another new series Blu-ray came out in April as Steelbook, but then from May and June we've got classic series content coming out in both the collector's edition format and these new standard editions of seasons 19 and 12. Those were released in July. There's a further 2 sets. There's season 10 and season 18. But in between that, we've got season 24 coming straight to Blu-ray for the very first time. And in August, still to come, we've just had confirmed the Web of Fear special edition Blu-ray and DVD. And then in September, it's the Evil of the Daleks. That gets fully animated, also on DVD and Blu-ray. So this is all really exciting stuff. But most of that, there's a heavy classic series vibe to it all, isn't there, Barnaby? Why do you think this is?
Oh, all sorts of different reasons. I mean, there's all the classic series has always been popular, and it's always going to stay popular. And I think particularly right now with the fandom, people want to go back and see all these amazing episodes in high definition, and there's so much amazing stuff on the Blu-rays anyway, and all the stuff on there, all the new stuff that's coming out and all the new footage that people are just so interested in that. And also Evil of the Daleks as well, which is it's one of my favorite Dalek episodes. Just that coming out in particular. I mean, that's something I'm very, very excited for. But it is a classic, brilliant story, which I just think is perfect. It's a perfect Dalek story. And yeah, I mean, there's just something. I mean, obviously I'm biased because I'm more of a classic fan than I am more of a New Who fan. But yeah, the classic will always just be, everything to do with it will always just be better. But yeah,
so
that's me.
Why is it for you that you gravitate more towards the classic series, with you being sort of bang in the middle? Because it could have gone either way for you, couldn't it?
Well, I first started with the classic, so they'll always have that nostalgia for me. But I just far prefer the serialization. I far prefer the stories being drawn out, and lots of really great and such fantastic acting as well, even in some of the not so great acting episodes. They're still fun to watch. And just I mean, Baker's era as well. He's still one of the best Doctors in my opinion, just seeing him out there. And I don't know, I guess because I sort of grew up with classic to a degree, and I had seen most of the classic era.
It's a cozy watch.
It's cozy, it's familiar, and yeah, it'll always have more of a place in my heart than New Who. So yeah.
So I'm intrigued. How was it that you came to because obviously Dan and I came across Classic Who because we watched it as it was broadcast, and so it was getting a lot of publicity on the BBC at the time. You always knew when a new season was coming up. So and back in those days, there were literally only 3 channels, and so by a method of elimination, you were likely at some point as a child in the 70s, 80s, and the 60s as well to stumble across Doctor Who. But you were far less likely to stumble across Doctor Who because it certainly wasn't on terrestrial mainstream broadcast television at that point. So I think you said you'd seen it on UK Gold. So I'm intrigued. How did you stumble across it, or were you introduced to it by somebody? How did you find it?
Oh, it was an utter stumble. I remember when I was a child, I was growing up in Isle of Wight, and I was walking past this shop which was selling like sort of old toys and things like that. I loved going in there as a kid, but I could never afford anything in there because it was all like collector stuff. So it was so exciting. And I was walking past the shop, and in the window was a Dipole Dalek in its original packaging, a little Dipole Dalek. And I said to my mum, "My God, what is that?" She goes like, "It's a Dalek," as if I was only like about 8 years old at the time. But obviously she'd be like, "Come on, you must know what a Dalek is." I'm like, "No." And so she said, "Yeah, it's this guy called the Doctor. He travels in a phone box or something, and he goes like through time and space." And I was like, "What?" So I was intrigued, and for my birthday, I can't remember if I've said this before. The first Doctor Who thing I did see was the Peter Cushing movie with the Daleks in it. We stopped off. I got for my birthday the Dalek, both movies in like a DVD a 2-pack. And I watched them, and I was going like, okay, so he's a human inventor with a granddaughter, and that's his and Chesterton
trying to stitch it all together,
going on with Barbara, and I'm like, oh, okay, it makes more sense. And then when I went to school, my last boarding school, when I was about sort of like 8 or when I was about 9 or 10, I had a friend there who said like, don't be stupid. No, he's an alien. I was like, no, he's not an alien. No, he's an old man. He's an old man inventor, and he's gonna don't be stupid. And he gave me the whole bunch of his CDs with Unearthly Child and the Daleks, and I listened to them all, and I far preferred that. I far preferred him being a mysterious alien, and we didn't quite know who he was or who Susan was, and all these kind of things. And I was just utterly hooked, and I worked through them all, and I can still remember being absolutely flabbergasted, hearing on the audio, like, wait, he's dying? And then he turns into someone completely different. And so for a way, even though it was only audio, for me, it was still like I was living it like you guys were first, probably like seeing it, like in the, I don't know if you saw it back in the 60s, when it first came out then. So
70s, Barnaby,
70s. Sorry. So even then, and then carrying on, and it became like, it was a real sort of like, I'm still friends with this guy. We still sometimes meet up, and he introduced me to when I first went off from the audios to the show me my first TV episode, which, if I remember correctly, I think it was an Unearthly Child, the first ever one I saw, but I can barely remember it. But then he had lots of Pertwees on VHS, but none in any particular order, so we'd watch them sporadically. I didn't see Pertwee's first episode until I think I was about like 17 or 18 or something like that. So it was all like all over the place. And so, yeah, from utterly stumbling and just complete and utter luck, just found a franchise, which was just wonderful, cozy, and it was just, I still rewatch to this day.
God, that is such an interesting story and an interesting way in. So in effect, would you say that you fell in love with it when you saw the Peter Cushing films, or did you not fall in love? Were you just kind of still intrigued at that point and didn't fall in love with it until you heard the audios, or did you not fall in love with it until you then finally saw the episodes? At what point do you think you became hooked?
It's interesting because even as a kid watching the Peter Cushing movie, I was getting, it was a bit silly with what's his name? They were quite sort of slapstick and thing. I think Chesterton was like, he's sitting on a button or something and a door opens, and I'm going like, it's a bit silly here. But I think I really fell in love through the audios and listening to Hartnell's voice. And I think what really did it for me was the Edge of Destruction. When he sits down in the last episode, he has a monologue where he's talking about where they are right now and they're at the Big Bang. And I'm just like hooked.
Captivated, absolutely captivated. Simply the words.
And I'm just stunned that you could fall in love with it. You're the first person I know who, in effect, fell in love with it through the audios, and that to me just goes to show the power of the storytelling of those episodes, because it's just so unusual to fall in love through the audio. Did you have photographic references to look? Had you got some sort of hook at that point? You kind of vaguely knew what a Dalek was, or was it all pretty much in your imagination at that point?
All I had as a young boy at boarding school, all I had was the CD cover, and I would listen to it while looking at the CD cover when I was 8 or 9 years old, just going like, okay, that's the TARDIS, that's a Dalek, and all these sort of things. And it was just
nuts.
But it really also, I mean, the production, also the acting as well. The fact, and they were stage actors, and so they used their bodies, but through their voices as well, I just felt I was there. And also the narrations done by Fraser Hines and the rest of them as well really were a perfect element to it. And I think that's also why I fell in love with the Big Finish as well, because I also listened to Winter for the Adept when I was 10 years old, and I thought that was an actual episode.
That's a Peter Davison Big Finish story, isn't it?
It's a Peter Davison one with Nissa, and I thought, there must be a TV version of this, and so I was scrabbling to the IT room at school and trying to find it, and get like, it's just a audio. That's confusing.
But the fact that it sounded that authentic to you, that it sat perfectly in the era.
So you would be listening to these episodes, and at that point, presumably, you knew that they did that it was a TV show, and so the video version existed. You knew what you were listening to in that respect, and so was it then? Did you then kind of go out and try and hunt down the TV show, or did you then sort of in effect stumble across that on UK Gold that you suddenly noticed they were broadcasting?
From my mate, and give me a couple of the VHSs, which is mostly Pertwee, but a lot of Pertwee's ones weren't on UK Gold at the time, and none of the Dalek ones were either, because I think there was a whole thing with Terry Nation's estate.
Terry Nation held them back,
yes, he held them back. So I didn't see so I didn't see a proper Dalek episode for a long time, but I did actively go out and hunt down as many of the DVDs I could find that were in Woolworths at the time, and just and the first one, what was the first? Oh, first one I owned was Earthshock, and that was a brilliant one. My first ever Peter Davison one until UK TV Gold started doing them all in order.
It's so strange because, of course, Dan and I and so many other fans obviously have just discovered it, literally in bite-sized chunks as a new season has come out through the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever it was. You discovered it, and there was literally, you opened the chest on a treasure trove of just an enormous back catalogue of stuff to go and literally cherry pick in and out. You must have felt like a kid in a candy store to discover that actually you found something you love, and there's so much of it to love.
Oh, it was a fantastic sort of thing, particularly sort of quite like not many friends as a child, but I had this whole like universe like I just suddenly opened up and was just digging into it. Had the novels and the comics as well at some point, because I think they were reprinting those around that kind of time, so I had them. And just diving into it, and utterly again flabbergasted as a kid that no one had heard of it. I'm sort of like running around talking about Doctor Who in the playground. People look at me like, no, Pokemon, right? I'm like, no, Doctor Who, and they're just like looking at me weirdly, like, yeah, you're a bit odd.
And this is something that's definitely carrying on, guys, because I'm now seeing people in their mid-20s, younger than yourself, by mid-20s. Early 20s, again, getting swept away in this. And I was wondering why, and I've got a theory that it's kind of born partly of the streaming age and this sort of this deluge of information and things that are sort of vying for our time, Simon. And you and I, we sometimes moan a little bit and say, "Oh, it's not like how it was back in the old days." Back then, we had to wait a week to get an episode. But I was thinking about it in the way that we watched it in this very sort of analog way. And you've got a chunk and a chunk and a chunk. Whereas people who decide they want to get into Doctor Who, they have a very similar experience to Barnaby. But Barnaby still, you still had to kind of dig in and locate, so you could view and take all this stuff in. You had to find what you could and piece it all together. Whereas now, all it really takes is $5.99 subscription to BritBox, and everything is there, this entire universe, and people can literally dive in with the remote control, Simon. Because I get asked quite a lot, where shall I start? And we've said this before, there are 3 or 4 really obvious starting points, but great many people literally pick a story at random, dive in, and they can afford to do that because they can be bathed in it all.
Yeah, and Doctor Who is absolutely one of those things where you, as I think really has happened with you, Barnaby, where you literally open a very small little chink and look inside and you see something that you like, and then you suddenly realise that actually it's enormous. Because if you once you've dipped into Doctor Who, if you discover you like it, there's just an enormous amount out of there to enjoy. And I also think that this is where the classic series does score over anything from 2005 onwards, because, as you have alluded to here, Barnaby, once you dip into those little, in effect, bite-sized chunks of a 25-minute episode, if it grabs you, you just want to go out and you want to watch episode 2 and then episode 3 and then episode 4. Whereas with the modern series from 2005 onwards, because it is in just discrete 45-minute chunks that you're kind of done, I think there is more ability for you as a viewer just to walk away and think, oh yeah, that was really good. Anyway, what are we having for tea? Whereas with those real little nuggets of 25 minutes that really hooked you in with those cliffhangers, they knew what they were doing with the cliffhangers.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that in many ways the classic series is the better way in to Doctor Who, because it's what draws you and makes you want to watch more. Whereas for me, the modern series is a little bit more, it's self-contained, it does what it says, and then it moves on. And so you move on as well. That's my theory as to why I think you'd be more hooked in by the classic show.
There used to be a lot of criticism of it, Barnaby, when I was, not just 20, but even when I was a child, when the show was still on, but when I was in my 20s and the show was off air and the stuff was coming out on video, and it was on UK Gold sort of originally, or BSB when it first appeared onto non-terrestrial TV, whereby it would get classified and dismissed as a lot of tatty dated old nonsense. And you would think that 3 decades on that would be increasingly the case, and yet it isn't. I think that Doctor Who, just like a lot of older shows, I think the original Star Trek has gone through the same kind of thing, where Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who, has managed to travel and to endure that entire time where it could be and was dismissed as being dated, to a point now where looking its age and being a product of its time is now, it's nothing to be poked fun at. It's largely accepted. It is enjoyed based on those virtues. I don't think it really matters how you consume that material. If you watch it and think, oh, isn't that cute? Weren't they doing their best? Or if you don't, or if you get completely enveloped by the story and production values just don't register with you, there's no right or wrong answer, and no correct or incorrect way to go on that journey. I think what matters is that you do connect with it on some level, rather than the level at which you do. And I think the fact that we do collect on different levels makes it much more interesting when fans like us, of whether it's across generations or across continents, get together and talk.
The production value and even the times. I mean, as a kid, never really got in the way of it, and still doesn't now. I mean, they always go on about walls kind of moving when you lean on them, but that's only ever happened in 1 or 2 episodes.
I never noticed. Never noticed. I do when I'm watching Fawlty Towers, Barnaby. I do when I see that.
Loads of it in Fawlty Towers.
The entire set is shaking, but nobody ever mentions about that. It's the classic, the perfect sitcom. No one ever mentions that set was never still, Simon.
It's ridiculous. Fawlty Towers, literally the whole set's just constantly moving
shaking
and forwards on the
like a house of...
And yeah, there are a few instances in Doctor Who. But no, I think again. What it is that the quality of the storytelling shines through, as does the characterization, as do the characters, as do the people portraying those characters. And also, I think the thing is with Doctor Who, there is the people making the show, both behind the cameras and in front of the cameras, did bring a little bit of extra love to their jobs, in the way that, as I say, we talked earlier about Terence Dix, who said, no, we just tried to get the show on air. Whilst that I think is clearly true, because they just got a job to do, I think also there is, you can see the love of Doctor Who shining through in all of those episodes. They weren't just trying to get the show on air and just do their job to get home in time.
Terence Dix was very, very playful, and he was very self-deprecating. And I think that some of that, there are measures of that in all of those quotes from Uncle Terence.
I agree. And I think, to me, it's obvious that, no, they were having a whale of a time. They were proud of what they were doing. This wasn't just another show. And I think that's what elevates it above certain other vintage TV of its era, which all it has is kind of its shaky sets. So even when Doctor Who does have a shaky set, you don't actually notice it. You don't notice the poor effects, if there's CSO fringing around the edges. It's not that it's part. I don't necessarily go with it, and it's part of its charm. I don't, because it's not part of its charm for me. It's just that it's a damned good program, and I don't care about the faults in it. I still want to watch it, and I still want to enjoy it for what it is. And it's lightning in a bottle. There is no two ways about it. Doctor Who is lightning in a bottle, and I think any broadcaster would pay a fortune to get something of the format of Doctor Who back again, that was that lightning in a bottle, because it's so difficult to. How many other shows like Doctor Who have endured? Pretty much none. Yeah. Doctor Who in many ways is a unique, truly unique production. And And as I say, I think any TV exec would give their eye teeth just to have a similar opportunity to come up with a similar format. And boy, they've tried. They've tried, but it's
They
not
really
easy
have
to do.
tried. I was over on Twitter a few days ago, and I think it was when the standard edition Blu-rays were released. Something new had been released, and I saw people in their early 20s. You know, they're getting their DVD through the post or getting their steelbook, and taking a selfie of them kissing this inanimate object, you know, and genuinely chuffed that this thing had come through the post. And I just think it's a wonderful thing for all the evils of social media, which we all talk about. And Twitter is probably the very worst for the behaviour of some factors on that platform. But there are a lot of sweet things to see. There are a lot of life affirming things to see, and there is a lot of the charm, the appeal, and the longevity of Doctor Who. Even if you don't read a single word and just scroll down something like Twitter, or to some extent Instagram as well, and you can see the affection radiating back from the audience. And Barnaby, you know, the look on your face when we talked a little about the fact that Evil of the Daleks is coming out on Blu-ray in animated form. There's that too. That's quite widespread too. I mean, I picked up this graphic here. I'm about to pop out to you now, pop on screen. So this is a fan that has put this together. I don't know which one, but they were so excited about Evil of the Daleks coming out. They've been and looked at every other candidate for the animated sort of remake process and tried to work out what could possibly come, when, how many stories, how many episodes. People go to these lengths. It's another form of list making, Simon, that Doctor Who fans have been doing for decades. But that was somebody, again, that excited by this line of merchandise, not by what's on TV. That's another question, but by the brand, by the universe itself, and all that material.
Yeah, Daleks Master Plan definitely needs to be.
Doctor Who is
take a while.
Oh, Daleks Master Plan. I mean, the one I'd love to see out of that is I'd love to see Marco Polo, because that's one of the stories that just really, really fascinates me. It seems like an absolutely cracking script, and I love the Aztecs. So to get a 7-episode historical by the same writer, I just think would be brilliant. But that's the one that you know you really want to see the episodes of that turn up, because I think that is one of all of them that animation will not do justice to the costumes and the sets that you had unless they spent a fortune on the animation, which they're clearly not able to do. So I think the Daleks Master Plan, even for all its 12 episodes, is far more likely to happen than Marco Polo. I think that will probably be the last one to be done.
I have to keep watching and keep waiting. What's going to be next on the list? What's coming for the rest of 2021 and into 2022? I never really know what they're going to pull out of the pack next. I didn't expect that Web of Fear special edition, for example. That was a nice surprise, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of other things in the coming years. The footage that we talked about, that Umatics footage of Fort Doomsday and the Keeper of Track, and we're told again that will be appearing on one of the collected edition Blu-ray sets at some point. You know, that's a range that's going to run on for another 3 or 4 years. So we've got that to look forward to. The Evil of the Daleks animated version, that's out in September, on the 27th of September 2021. We'll look forward to that too. Exciting times for Doctor Who, certainly off screen and within the fandom. Going to get together and talk about some of it, I'm sure, as it's released. But that's the old girl rumbling away in the background, starting up and calling time on another Type 40. I'll be back with a further installment soon. Look out for that wherever you found this. It could have been on the dedicated home of Type 40, type40.podbean.com, a dedicated podcast feed due to popular demand, of course. Other than that, you can catch us on the podcatcher of your choice: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeart Radio, TuneIn, Google Play, and the Podbean app itself. We're also on YouTube, the world's largest streaming platform, on the Spacebooks YouTube channel, or the Fandom Podcast Network's own channel too. And we're still on the Fandom Podcast Network's Master Feed. That's loaded with so many treats for your ears on a weekly basis. Maybe you'd like to have your say. Let us know what you think of it all. Reach out to us at our social media presence, Instagram and Twitter at Type40Doctor Who, or you can email us type40doctorwho@gmail.com. And if you're feeling really brave and fancy some real-time, extra-dimensional chit-chat, you can head over to Facebook and join the Type 40 Facebook group, 5 years old this summer and still full of fans of all ages, sharing both classic and new Doctor Who gold. There's lots going on there on a daily basis. Simon, where can people catch up with you on social media?
People can come and find me on Facebook if they look for Doctor Who The Whonatics, WHONATICS. I am the admin on there, so come and say hello on there.
And Barnaby, where can people catch up with you or hear some of your work more to the point?
Oh, just more on my YouTube channel, which is just called Barnaby for simplicity's sake.
No fat on that, is there?
No fat.
And you can find me scattered through all of space and time, but mostly on Twitter and Instagram as the Spacebook, where I'm wheezing and I'm groaning and posting about all things geeky inside and outside of the TARDIS. Thanks again, both, for this nice casual chat about classic and new Doctor Who. I don't think we've really cleared anything up whatsoever, but it's been a good giggle. And yes, I'm educated as to the formats of these tapes. So thanks for bringing those out again, Simon. That was a lot of fun. And thanks to everybody out there for watching and for listening, for being here. We'll always have the time here at Type 40 if you have the space. But yeah, that is it for now. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Goodbye, Engin.